Daniel was tired. Not just the kind of tired you feel after a long day, but the deep exhaustion that settles into your bones when life keeps pushing you down. It was almost midnight on a freezing January night in Seattle, and he'd just finished another double shift at the print shop. His fingers still smelled like ink and his back ached from standing for 16 hours straight. He pulled his jacket tighter as he stepped out into the cold. The rain had finally stopped, but the wind cut through the empty streets like a knife. Daniel checked his phone. The last bus would be coming in 20 minutes. He had exactly $43 in his wallet, and payday wasn't until Friday. 3 more days of stretching whatever food he had left in his apartment. At 28 years old, this wasn't how he'd imagined his life would turn out. He'd gone to college for graphic design, dreamed of running his own creative studio, helping small businesses build their brands. But dreams don't pay rent. His freelance work had dried up months ago, and now he was working night shifts just to keep his tiny apartment and maybe, if he was lucky, eat something besides instant noodles. The bus stop was just 2 blocks away. Daniel walked quickly, his breath forming small clouds in the frozen air. That's when he saw her. A woman was sitting on a wooden bench near the corner. At first, Daniel almost walked past. Seattle had plenty of people sitting on benches at night, and he'd learned the hard way to mind his own business. But something made him look twice. She was shaking. Not just shivering from the cold, but trembling violently, like her whole body was in shock. Her clothes were completely soaked even though the rain had stopped over an hour ago. She wore what looked like expensive business attire, a dark blazer and dress pants, but everything clung to her like she'd been standing in a shower. Her dark hair was plastered to her face and she was staring straight ahead at nothing. Daniel stopped walking. He knew he should keep going. He had his own problems. He was cold, tired, and broke. Getting involved in someone else's crisis was the last thing he needed, but he couldn't move his feet forward. "Hey," he called out softly, taking a few steps closer. "Are you okay?" The woman didn't respond. She didn't even seem to hear him. Her eyes were unfocused and her lips had a bluish tint. Daniel's stomach dropped. This wasn't just someone having a bad night. Something was seriously wrong. He came closer and knelt down in front of the bench. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Still nothing. Her shaking was getting worse. Daniel reached out carefully and touched her hand. It was ice cold, colder than the air around them. That's when real fear kicked in. This woman needed help and she needed it now. Daniel looked around desperately. The street was empty. No cars, no people, nobody who could help. He pulled out his phone and thought about calling 911. But what would he tell them? She wasn't unconscious, wasn't injured that he could see. They might take hours to respond to something that wasn't obviously an emergency, and she could freeze to death by then. He made a decision. Without thinking too much about it, Daniel took off his jacket. It was the only winter coat he owned, the one thing keeping him from freezing on his walk to the bus. But this woman needed it more than he did. He draped it carefully over her shoulders, and she didn't react at all. It was like she wasn't even aware of the world around her. "Okay," Daniel said, more to himself than to her. "We need to get you somewhere warm." He tried to help her stand, but her legs wouldn't support her weight. She was completely out of it, unable to walk or even respond to basic questions. Daniel felt panic rising in his chest. What was he supposed to do? He couldn't just leave her here. But he also couldn't carry her, and he had no idea where she lived or how to reach anyone who knew her. Then he remembered the rideshare app on his phone. He opened it with shaking fingers and requested a car. The estimated cost made his heart sink. $22. That was more than half of what he had left until Friday. But what choice did he have? The car arrived in 8 minutes, though it felt like an hour. Daniel helped the woman to her feet, supporting most of her weight as he guided her to the car. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, looked concerned. "Is she all right?" he asked. "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "She's not responding to anything. I think she's in shock or something. Can you help me get her in?" Together, they managed to get her into the back seat. Daniel climbed in beside her, making sure she was buckled in safely. The driver was still looking worried. "Where are we going?" That was the problem. Daniel had no idea where this woman lived. He'd tried checking her purse for ID, but felt weird going through a stranger's belongings. And even if he found an address, he couldn't just drop her off at her doorstep if she was in this condition. What if she collapsed? What if something worse happened? "Take us to this address," Daniel heard himself say, and he gave the driver his own apartment address. It was a stupid decision, probably. bringing a complete stranger to his home, someone who clearly had problems he knew nothing about. But it was the only thing he could think of that felt right. The ride took 15 minutes. The woman stayed silent the entire time, her shaking gradually getting less violent in the warm car. Daniel kept glancing at her, trying to figure out who she was. Her clothes were definitely expensive, even ruined by water. Her nails were perfectly manicured. She had the look of someone successful, someone whose life was very different from his own. When they reached his building, the driver helped him get her inside. Daniel tipped him the last $5 from his wallet, leaving him with just $16 for the rest of the week. The driver refused at first, but Daniel insisted. The man had gone above and beyond, and kindness deserved to be repaid. Getting her up the stairs to his second-floor apartment was a challenge. The woman was moving a bit more now, her feet shuffling along with his guidance, but she still wasn't speaking or making eye contact. Daniel fumbled with his keys, finally got the door open and helped her inside. His apartment looked even worse than usual in the harsh overhead light. One room that served as bedroom, living room, and kitchen all in one. Furniture from thrift stores and curbs. Bills piled on the tiny counter, several of them marked with red overdue stamps. This was embarrassing, bringing someone here, but he pushed the feeling aside. This wasn't about his pride. He guided her to his bed, the only real piece of furniture he had. She sat down heavily, still shaking, but not as badly as before. Daniel grabbed every blanket he owned and piled them around her. Then he went to his tiny kitchen area and turned on the electric kettle. Tea. Hot tea might help. While the water heated, Daniel finally allowed himself to really worry about what he'd just done. He'd brought a complete stranger into his home, spent money he desperately needed, and given away his only jacket. He had no idea who this woman was or what had happened to her. For all he knew, she could be dangerous. Or maybe she had people looking for her, people who'd think he'd done something wrong. But when he looked at her sitting there, wrapped in his old blankets, still staring at nothing, he knew he'd made the right choice. Whatever her story was, she'd needed help. And sometimes that's all that matters. You help because it's the right thing to do, not because it makes sense or because you can afford it. Daniel made the tea and brought it over to her. Her hands were shaking less now, and she took the cup from him automatically, though she didn't drink. He sat down on the floor across from her, exhausted and cold in just his thin work shirt, and waited to see what the morning would bring. Daniel woke up to sunlight streaming through his thin curtains. For a moment he forgot everything that had happened. Then his neck reminded him that he'd slept on the couch, and it all came rushing back. The woman. The bench. His jacket that he'd never see again. He sat up quickly, looking toward his bed. She was still there, sleeping peacefully under the pile of blankets. Her breathing was steady now, normal. The scary shaking from last night was gone. Relief washed over him. At least she was okay. Daniel stood up quietly and checked his phone. 6 a.m. He'd only slept for about 4 hours, but his body was too wired to rest anymore. He had a million questions running through his head. Who was this woman? What had happened to her? And what was he supposed to do now? He walked softly to his tiny kitchen area and opened the refrigerator. The sight was depressing. Half a carton of eggs, some butter, 2 slices of bread, and a mostly empty bottle of ketchup. That was it. That was everything he had until Friday. He'd planned to make those eggs last 3 days. But he couldn't let this woman wake up to an empty stomach, not after whatever she'd been through. Daniel took out the eggs and bread and started cooking. The smell filled his small apartment, and he heard movement from the bed. He turned to see the woman sitting up, looking around with confused eyes. When she saw him, she jumped slightly, then winced and put a hand to her head. "It's okay," Daniel said quickly, keeping his voice gentle. "You're safe. I found you on a bench last night. You were really out of it, so I brought you here." The woman stared at him for a long moment, and he could see her trying to piece together what had happened. Her eyes moved around the apartment, taking in the cramped space, the bills on the counter, the worn furniture. Then she looked down at herself, still wearing her damp clothes from last night. "Oh my God," she whispered, and her face turned red with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry. I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to apologize," Daniel said. "Are you feeling better? You were really cold last night. I was worried." She nodded slowly, pulling the blankets tighter around herself. "I think so. My head hurts and I feel like I got hit by a truck, but yeah, I'm better." She paused, looking embarrassed again. "This is so humiliating." I can't believe I put you through this. Daniel brought over the plate of scrambled eggs and toast, the last of his food. Here, you should eat something. The woman looked at the plate, then at the empty kitchen behind him, and something shifted in her expression. Is this all you have? Don't worry about it, Daniel said, trying to smile. I already ate. It was a lie, but a small one. He could skip breakfast. He'd done it plenty of times before. She didn't believe him. He could see it in her eyes. But she was hungry enough that she took the plate anyway, eating slowly. Daniel made instant coffee, the cheap kind that tastes like burnt water, and offered her a cup. She took it with both hands like it was the best thing she'd ever tasted. After a few minutes of silence, she finally spoke. I'm Victoria, she said quietly, and I owe you an explanation. You don't owe me anything, Daniel replied, sitting down on the floor across from her. His couch only fit one person comfortably. Yes, I do, Victoria insisted. She set down the coffee cup and took a deep breath. Last night was the worst night of my life. I'd just come from a meeting, a really important meeting that went completely wrong. I can't get into all the details, but let's just say some people I trusted turned out to be very different from what I thought. Daniel nodded, not pushing for more information. I was upset, not thinking clearly. I started walking in the rain without my phone or my security detail or anything. Just walked and walked until I couldn't feel my feet anymore, and then I guess I just sat down and stopped moving. I don't really remember much after that until I woke up here. Security detail. The words hung in the air. Daniel felt something shift in his understanding of the situation. This wasn't just some professional woman having a bad day. This was something bigger. Who are you? He asked, the question coming out before he could stop it. Victoria looked uncomfortable. Does the name Rodriguez Innovations mean anything to you? Daniel's eyes went wide. Of course he knew Rodriguez Innovations. Everyone in Seattle knew them. They were one of the biggest tech companies in the city, worth billions. They had that huge building downtown with the logo that lit up at night. You work there? He asked. Victoria gave him a sad smile. I own it. Well, I'm the CEO. Founded it 12 years ago with my college roommate. It's my whole life. Daniel felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. The woman sleeping in his bed, wearing his blankets, eating his last eggs was a billionaire CEO. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. I know what you're thinking, Victoria said, watching his face. What's someone like me doing having a breakdown on a park bench? But money and success don't protect you from everything. Sometimes they make things worse. Last night proved that. They sat in silence for a moment. Daniel's mind was racing. He'd helped a CEO, an actual billionaire. Part of him wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. Here he was, barely able to afford food, and he'd rescued one of the richest people in the city. Victoria stood up, a bit unsteady on her feet. I should call someone to come get me. Could I borrow your phone? Daniel handed it over and she made a quick call. From what he could hear, someone was coming to pick her up right away. When she hung up, she looked around the apartment again, her eyes landing on the pile of overdue bills. I need to give you something, she said, for your trouble. For the food, the cab, your jacket? No, Daniel said immediately. I didn't help you for money. Anyone would have done the same thing. Victoria looked at him for a long moment, and there was something sad in her expression. That's where you're wrong, she said softly. Most people wouldn't have stopped. Most people would have walked right past me, assumed I was drunk or high or someone else's problem. You gave up things you clearly needed to help a complete stranger. That's not common. That's actually pretty rare. Daniel felt uncomfortable with the praise. I just did what felt right. Exactly, Victoria said. And that matters more than you know. A car horn honked outside. Victoria walked to the window and looked down at the street. A black luxury car was waiting. She turned back to Daniel. Before I go, I need your contact information. Your full name, phone number, email if you have one. Daniel hesitated. This felt weird, like maybe she was going to sue him or something. But Victoria seemed to read his mind. I'm not going to cause you trouble, she said. The opposite, actually. But I need a little time to figure some things out first. Please, I promise this is a good thing. Something in her voice made Daniel trust her. He wrote down his information on a scrap of paper and handed it to her. Victoria took it carefully, folding it and putting it in her pocket. I noticed your website on your laptop, she said, gesturing to his old computer on the desk. Daniel Kim Designs. Your portfolio is really good. Better than good, actually. It's different from most of the corporate stuff I see. Daniel was surprised she'd looked. Thanks. It's not getting much attention lately, but I keep trying. Victoria smiled, and it was the first real smile he'd seen from her. Keep trying, she said. Trust me on that. Before leaving, she insisted on pushing some money into his hand. Daniel tried to refuse, but she was stubborn. For the jacket, at least. And the cab. Please, let me do this one small thing. When he finally looked at what she'd given him after she left, Daniel's hand started shaking. $500. She'd given him $500. That was more than his rent. That was groceries for 2 months if he was careful. That was everything. He sat down on his couch, still warm from where he'd slept, and stared at the money. Part of him felt guilty for taking it. But another part, the practical part that had been struggling for so long, felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Daniel had no idea that this was just the beginning. He had no idea that the woman he'd helped would change his entire life. All he knew in that moment was that sometimes doing the right thing actually works out. Sometimes kindness comes back to you when you need it most. He made himself the last cup of instant coffee and allowed himself to hope, just a little bit, that maybe things were finally going to get better. 2 weeks passed, and Daniel almost convinced himself it had all been a dream. Victoria hadn't called. She hadn't texted. There was nothing. He'd check his phone obsessively for the first few days, but eventually, he stopped expecting anything. Rich people were busy, he told himself. She probably forgot about him the moment she stepped into that luxury car. The $500 had been a lifesaver, though. He'd paid his overdue electric bill, bought actual groceries, and even got a cheap replacement jacket from a thrift store. But the money was running low again, and his freelance design business was still going nowhere. He'd sent out 15 proposals in the past week alone. 15 carefully crafted pitches to small businesses who needed help with their branding. He'd gotten 0 responses. Daniel was sitting at his desk staring at another rejection email when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, assuming it was a spam call, but something made him pick up. Hello? Daniel, this is Victoria. Victoria Rodriguez. Do you remember me? His heart jumped into his throat. Of course I remember you. How are you? Are you okay? I'm much better, thanks to you. There was a smile in her voice. Listen, I know this is sudden, but are you free for coffee today? There's something I want to talk to you about. Daniel looked around his messy apartment, then at his empty calendar. Free? He was always free. Sure, when and where? She gave him an address in downtown Seattle, one of those expensive cafes where a single coffee probably cost more than his entire lunch budget. They agreed to meet in an hour. Daniel spent 45 minutes trying to make himself look presentable. His best clothes were still just okay, nothing fancy, but at least they were clean. He took the bus downtown, counting the cost of the fare and trying not to think about how much this coffee meeting was going to set him back financially. The cafe was exactly as fancy as he'd feared. Marble counters, designer lighting, people in business suits typing on expensive laptops. Daniel felt completely out of place in his thrift store jacket and worn jeans. He spotted Victoria immediately. She was sitting at a corner table, looking completely different from the broken woman he'd found on that bench. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless, wearing an outfit that probably cost more than his car used to be worth before it died. But when she saw him, her face lit up with genuine warmth and she stood to greet him. Daniel, thank you so much for coming. She gestured to the chair across from her. Please sit. Order anything you want. It's on me. When the waiter came by, Victoria ordered for both of them without asking what he wanted. 2 coffees, some fancy pastries, and a couple of sandwiches. Daniel was grateful. He would have just ordered water and felt awkward about it the whole time. So, Victoria said once they were alone again, I bet you're wondering why I called. The thought crossed my mind, Daniel admitted. Victoria leaned forward, her expression serious. I need to be honest with you about something. That night you found me, it wasn't just a bad meeting. It was an attempted coup. People I'd worked with for years, people I trusted, tried to push me out of my own company. They called an emergency board meeting, presented fabricated evidence of mismanagement, the whole thing. I barely kept my position. Daniel didn't know what to say. This was so far outside his world that he couldn't even imagine it. I was devastated, Victoria continued. I built that company from nothing. 12 years of my life, and they almost took it away in one night. That's why I was in that state when you found me. I'd lost faith in everything. In people, in myself, in whether any of it was worth it. I'm sorry that happened to you, Daniel said quietly. Victoria smiled. Here's the thing, though. You reminded me of something important. When I was starting out, before the money and the success and the politics, I was doing it because I wanted to help people. I wanted to create something meaningful. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. The company became about profits and market share and board meetings. But you helped me without expecting anything in return. You gave up things you needed for a complete stranger. That's the kind of person I used to be, and I want to be that person again. Daniel wasn't sure where this was going, but something in his chest was starting to feel tight with anticipation. So I've spent the last 2 weeks doing my homework, Victoria said. She pulled out a tablet and turned it toward him. On the screen was his website, his portfolio, even his social media accounts. I hope you don't mind, but I had my team look into you. Your work is incredible, Daniel. Your designs are fresh, authentic, real. They're not the polished corporate garbage I see every day. They feel human. Daniel felt his face getting hot. Thank you, but I don't understand what this has to do with anything. Victoria put the tablet away and looked him straight in the eye. Rodriguez Innovations is doing a complete rebrand. New logo, new website, new marketing materials, everything. We're going in a different direction. Something more authentic and connected to real people instead of just shareholders. And I want you to lead the project. The words didn't make sense at first. Daniel just stared at her, trying to process what she'd said. You want me to what? Lead the rebrand. I'm offering you a 3-month contract as lead designer. If it works out, we'll talk about something more permanent. Victoria, I appreciate this, I really do, but I'm not qualified for something like that. Your company is worth billions. You should have top agencies fighting for this kind of work. I have had top agencies, Victoria said firmly. They're all the same. Slick presentations, focus group designs that look like everything else in Silicon Valley. I don't want that anymore. I want something real. And your portfolio shows me you can deliver that. Daniel's mind was racing. This was insane. This was the opportunity of a lifetime. But it was also terrifying. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? Then you fail, Victoria said with a shrug. But I don't think you will. You want to know why I really trust you with this? It's not just because your work is good. It's because that night when you had almost nothing, you still gave. That tells me something about your character, and character matters more than experience. She slid a folder across the table. The contract is in here. The pay is fair, I promise. Take it home, read it over, think about it. But Daniel, I really hope you say yes. This isn't charity. I'm not doing this because I feel bad for you. I'm doing this because I genuinely believe you're the right person for the job. Daniel opened the folder with shaking hands. His eyes went to the compensation section, and his breath caught in his throat. The number there was more than he'd make in a year at the print shop. For 3 months of work. This can't be right, he whispered. It's right. And that's just the base rate. There are bonuses if the project performs well. Victoria finished her coffee and stood up. I have another meeting in 20 minutes. Take the weekend to think about it. Call me Monday with your decision. She started to leave, then turned back. Oh, and Daniel, one more thing. When you start and I say when, not if, because I think you're going to say yes, it won't be easy. I have a creative director named Robert Chen, who's been with the company for 8 years. He's not going to be happy about an outsider coming in and leading a major project. Some of the other designers won't be either. You're going to face resistance, maybe even sabotage. I'm telling you this because I want you to be prepared. Then why hire me if it's going to cause problems? Daniel asked. Victoria smiled. Because sometimes the right choice isn't the easy choice. And because I think you're stronger than you give yourself credit for. You didn't walk past me that night when it would have been easier. You won't walk away from a challenge when it matters either. After she left, Daniel sat there for a long time, staring at the contract. The cafe buzzed with activity around him. Successful people making deals and building careers, and for the first time in years, he felt like maybe he could be one of them. He thought about his tiny apartment, his stack of bills, his dying design business. He thought about his parents who'd worked 3 jobs to put him through college, and how disappointed they tried not to look when he couldn't make it work. He thought about every rejection email, every client who'd ghosted him. Every night he'd gone to bed wondering if he should just give up on his dreams. And then he thought about Victoria, shivering on that bench, and how one simple act of kindness had led to this moment. Daniel pulled out his phone and typed a text to Victoria. He didn't need the weekend to decide. He already knew his answer. I'm in. When do I start? The response came back almost immediately. Monday. 9 a.m. Don't be late. And Daniel, thank you for taking a chance on this. I promise you won't regret it. Daniel walked out of that cafe feeling like a different person. He was scared and excited and completely overwhelmed. But for the first time in forever, he felt something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. Real. Genuine hope that his life was about to change. He had no idea just how right he was. Monday morning came faster than Daniel expected. He stood outside the Rodriguez Innovations building at 8:45, staring up at the glass tower that seemed to touch the clouds. His reflection in the windows looked small and out of place. He'd bought a new shirt with some of Victoria's money, but he still felt like a kid playing dress-up in adult clothes. The lobby was all marble and modern art, with a reception desk that looked like something from a science fiction movie. Daniel gave his name to the security guard, who checked a list and handed him a temporary badge. 15th floor. Someone will meet you at the elevator. The elevator ride felt like it took forever. Daniel's stomach was doing flips. What was he doing here? He was a failed freelancer who worked night shifts at a print shop. These people were going to see right through him. The elevator doors opened and a young woman with a tablet was waiting. Daniel Kim? I'm Ashley, Victoria's assistant. Follow me. She led him through an open office space that was nothing like he'd imagined. Instead of boring cubicles, there were comfortable couches, standing desks, even a few hammocks. People were working on expensive computers, having quiet conversations, moving around freely. It looked more like a trendy coffee shop than an office. This is the creative department, Ashley explained. Your team is waiting in the conference room, your team. The words sent another wave of nervousness through Daniel's body. He had a team now. People who would be depending on him, judging him, watching his every move. Ashley opened a glass door to a large conference room. 6 people were sitting around a table, and they all turned to look at him when he walked in. The conversation stopped. The room went quiet. Daniel felt like a bug under a microscope. Everyone, this is Daniel Kim, your new lead designer for the rebrand project, Ashley announced. Then she left, closing the door behind her, and Daniel was alone with 6 pairs of eyes staring at him. An older man at the head of the table stood up. He was probably in his early 50s, wearing an expensive suit, with silver hair and sharp eyes that didn't look friendly. Robert Chen, creative director. I've been with Rodriguez Innovations for 8 years. He didn't offer his hand. I have to say, we were all surprised when Victoria announced this decision. We have protocols for hiring, especially for projects of this magnitude. Daniel swallowed hard. This was the guy Victoria had warned him about. I understand this is unusual. I'm grateful for the opportunity and excited to work with all of you. Excited, Robert repeated like the word tasted bad. This rebrand is a $10 million project, the biggest in company history, and Victoria gave it to someone who runs a one-person operation out of their apartment. The other designers shifted uncomfortably. One woman looked sympathetic. The others just looked curious, waiting to see what would happen. I know I have a lot to prove, Daniel said, trying to keep his voice steady, but I promise I'm going to give this everything I have. I'm not here to step on anyone's toes. I'm here to do good work. Robert sat back down, his expression cold. We'll see. Ashley sent you the project brief. I expect initial concepts by Friday. That gives you 4 days. Most agencies would need 4 weeks, but Victoria seems to think you're special, so let's see what you can do. 4 days. Daniel's heart sank. That was barely any time at all, but he nodded. I'll have something by Friday. The meeting continued, with Robert laying out expectations and deadlines that seemed designed to make Daniel fail. When it finally ended, the other designers filed out quickly except for the woman who'd looked sympathetic earlier. She waited until Robert left, then approached Daniel. Hey, I'm Nina Patel, don't let Robert get to you. He's been gunning for this project for months and he's bitter that Victoria went with someone else. Thanks, Daniel said, grateful for at least one friendly face. Any advice for surviving around here? Nina laughed. Keep your head down, do good work, and watch your back. Robert has a habit of taking credit for other people's ideas. Document everything. Save all your files with timestamps and don't share anything with him until you're ready to present to Victoria. That night, Daniel barely slept. He worked until 3 in the morning, sketching ideas, researching competitors, trying to figure out what Victoria meant by authentic and real. His apartment was covered in papers, empty coffee cups, and half-eaten takeout containers. This was it. This was his shot. He couldn't blow it. The next few days were a blur. Daniel showed up early and stayed late, working alongside his new team. Most of them were nice enough, though they kept their distance. He could tell they were waiting to see if he'd fail. Nina helped when she could, explaining company politics and pointing out resources he didn't know existed. But Robert was a constant problem. He'd show up at Daniel's desk with suggestions that were really criticisms. He'd schedule team meetings without inviting Daniel. Once, Daniel caught him going through files on the shared drive, looking at Daniel's early concepts. On Thursday afternoon, Daniel was putting the finishing touches on his presentation when his computer crashed. Just completely died right in the middle of saving his work. He tried everything, but the file was corrupted. 12 hours of work gone. He wanted to scream. He wanted to cry. He wanted to quit and go back to his simple life at the print shop where the worst thing that could happen was a paper jam. Nina found him sitting at his desk, staring at the blank screen. What happened? My file corrupted. Everything I did today is gone. The presentation is tomorrow morning and I'm back to square one. Nina looked concerned. That's weird. Our systems are pretty stable. Did anyone else use your computer today? Daniel thought about it. I went to lunch around noon. I was gone maybe 40 minutes. And your computer was unlocked? No, I locked it. I always lock it. But even as he said it, doubt crept in. Had he locked it? He'd been so tired, working so many hours. Maybe he'd forgotten. Nina didn't say anything, but her expression told him what she was thinking. Robert. But they had no proof, and accusing the creative director of sabotage on his fourth day would be career suicide. I'll help you, Nina said suddenly. I'll stay late. We'll rebuild it together. What do you remember? They worked until midnight, recreating Daniel's presentation from memory and rough sketches. Nina was amazing, filling in gaps and offering suggestions that made everything better. By the time they finished, Daniel's eyes were burning with exhaustion, but the presentation was done. It was good, maybe even great. Friday morning, Daniel walked into the conference room where Victoria and the executive team were waiting. Robert was there too, sitting in the back with a smug expression, like he was expecting Daniel to fail. Daniel set up his presentation with shaking hands. This was it. Everything came down to the next 30 minutes. Before we start, Victoria said, I want everyone to know that I've asked Daniel to approach this project differently than we've done things in the past. I want authentic. I want real. I want something that reminds people that Rodriguez Innovations was built by humans. For humans. Daniel took a deep breath and began. He talked about his research, about how every tech company looked the same, sounded the same, felt the same, sterile, corporate, disconnected from real life. Then he showed his concepts. Instead of sleek minimalism, he'd drawn inspiration from real people and real stories. The new logo featured hand-drawn elements. The color palette was warm instead of cold. The tagline he'd written was simple: innovation that feels human. The room was quiet when he finished. Daniel couldn't read their faces. Had he completely missed the mark? Was this a disaster? Then Victoria started clapping. Slowly at first, then faster. The other executives joined in. Even some of Robert's team members looked impressed. This is exactly what I was hoping for, Victoria said, standing up to look at the designs more closely. This feels real. This feels like us, like who we should be. She turned to Daniel with a genuine smile. Exceptional work. Let's move forward with this direction. Daniel felt like he might pass out from relief. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. Robert stood up abruptly. Victoria, might I have a word with you? Privately? Victoria's smile faded slightly. Of course. They left the room and Daniel could see them talking through the glass walls. Robert was animated, clearly upset about something. Victoria's expression remained calm but firm. The conversation lasted 5 minutes, and when they came back, Robert looked furious. I've decided to restructure the creative department, Victoria announced to everyone. Effective immediately, Daniel will be taking over as creative director. Robert will be transitioning to a senior advisory role. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Daniel felt like he'd been hit by lightning. Creative director? That wasn't part of the deal. That was Robert's job. Robert's face was red with anger, but he said nothing. He just gathered his things and walked out, slamming the door behind him. After everyone left, Victoria pulled Daniel aside. I know that was dramatic, but it needed to happen. Robert tried to sabotage you. He thought I wouldn't find out. But I have access to all computer logs. I saw him corrupt your file yesterday. You knew? Daniel asked, stunned. I knew. And I wanted to see how you'd handle it. You didn't complain, didn't make excuses, didn't quit. You just found a solution and kept working. That's the kind of person I need leading this department. She paused. I'm offering you a permanent position, Daniel. Full benefits, competitive salary, stock options. What do you say? Daniel thought about his tiny apartment, his night shifts, his years of struggle and rejection. He thought about that night on the bench when he'd given away his jacket without knowing it would change everything. Yes, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Yes, I say yes, Victoria shook his hand. Welcome to Rodriguez Innovations, Director Kim. Now let's change the world together. 6 months had passed since that freezing January night, and Daniel still had trouble believing his life was real. He woke up every morning in a decent apartment with actual furniture, not the cramped studio with the lumpy couch. His refrigerator was full of real food, not just eggs and instant noodles. His bank account had money in it. Actual savings. Money he didn't have to spend immediately on overdue bills. But the biggest change wasn't the money. It was the work itself. The rebrand campaign had launched 3 months ago, and the response had been incredible. Rodriguez Innovations' new look, with its human-centered approach and warm, authentic messaging, had struck a chord with people. Customer satisfaction was up 40%. Social media engagement had tripled. Even the tech blogs that usually criticized everything were writing positive reviews. Daniel's team had grown from 6 people to 15. Nina was now his second in command, and together they'd built something special. A creative department that actually cared about making meaningful work, not just chasing trends or copying what everyone else was doing. His parents had cried when he told them about the promotion. His mom kept showing his business card to everyone at church. His dad, who'd always been quiet about his disappointments, told him he was proud. That moment alone had made everything worth it, but tonight was different. Tonight was bigger than anything Daniel had experienced so far. Victoria had invited him to a charity gala at the city's fanciest hotel, the kind of event where tickets cost more than his old monthly rent. She'd texted him that morning, "Wear something nice. There's someone I want you to meet." Daniel stood in front of his closet, looking at the new suit he'd bought for occasions like this. He still felt like an imposter sometimes, like someone would figure out he didn't belong in these spaces, but he was learning to push past that feeling. He'd earned his place here. The hotel ballroom was something out of a movie. Crystal chandeliers, tables covered in white silk, waiters carrying trays of champagne and fancy appetizers. Daniel spotted Victoria across the room, talking with a group of important-looking people. She saw him and waved him over. "Daniel." "Perfect timing." She turned to the group. "Everyone, this is Daniel Kim, our creative director. He's the genius behind our new brand identity." The next hour was a blur of handshakes and conversations. Business owners, other CEOs, city council members, even a few celebrities. Daniel tried to remember names and companies, but it was overwhelming. These were the kind of people he used to see on magazine covers, and now they were asking him about his design process like his opinion actually mattered. Eventually, Victoria pulled him aside to a quieter corner of the room. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, her expression more serious than usual. "Something I should have told you months ago." Daniel felt his stomach tighten. Was this it? Was the dream about to end? Had he done something wrong? "That night you found me," Victoria continued. "I told you it was the worst night of my life. That was true. But I didn't tell you everything. After I secured my position as CEO, I started thinking about what really mattered. Not the money or the power, but the impact. What was I actually doing with all this success?" She paused, looking out at the crowded ballroom. "I grew up poor, Daniel. Really poor. My mom cleaned houses, my dad worked construction when he could find work. I built Rodriguez Innovations because I wanted to prove I was more than where I came from. But somewhere along the way, I forgot about all the people still struggling like I used to. People like you were when I met you." Daniel wasn't sure where this was going, but he stayed quiet and listened. "So I've started something new," Victoria said. "A foundation. The Rodriguez Foundation for Creative Entrepreneurs. It's going to provide grants, mentorship, and resources to struggling artists, designers, small business owners, people with talent who just need someone to believe in them." That's amazing, Daniel said, and he meant it. Victoria smiled. I'm making the announcement tonight. And there's more. I want you to be the creative director of the foundation. You'd still keep your position at Rodriguez Innovations, but you'd also oversee all the foundation's branding, marketing, and creative initiatives. It would mean more work, but also more impact. Real impact on real people's lives. Daniel felt tears threatening to form in his eyes. Victoria, I don't know what to say. Say yes, she laughed. Say yes and help me give other people the same chance you gave me. The chance I gave you. Daniel was confused. You gave me everything. The job, the opportunity, all of this. Victoria shook her head. No, Daniel. You gave me something much more valuable. That night when you stopped to help me, when you gave up your jacket and your money and your time for a stranger, you reminded me what being human actually means. You showed me that success isn't measured in dollars or market share. It's measured in how we treat each other when no one's watching and there's nothing in it for us. Before Daniel could respond, Victoria was called to the stage. The room quieted down as she approached the microphone. Daniel watched from the side, still processing everything she'd just told him. Good evening, everyone, Victoria began. Thank you all for being here tonight. I want to tell you a story about a cold night in January and a man who changed my life. Daniel's heart started pounding. What was she doing? Victoria told the whole story. The bench, the rain, how lost she'd been. She described Daniel's kindness in detail, how he'd given up everything to help someone he didn't know. She didn't leave anything out, including her own vulnerability and breakdown. That man is here tonight, she said, gesturing toward Daniel. Daniel Kim, would you please join me? Daniel's legs felt like rubber as he walked toward the stage. Hundreds of people were staring at him. Some were even starting to applaud. He reached Victoria's side, completely overwhelmed. Daniel's act of kindness didn't just help me that night, Victoria continued. It fundamentally changed how I see success and what I want to do with my life. That's why I'm proud to announce the Rodriguez Foundation for Creative Entrepreneurs, which will launch next month with an initial funding of $50 million. The room erupted in applause. Victoria had to wait for it to die down before continuing. This foundation will provide grants, mentorship programs, and resources to talented individuals who are struggling to make their dreams a reality. People like Daniel was just 7 months ago, and Daniel has agreed to serve as the foundation's creative director, helping us identify and support the next generation of creative entrepreneurs. More applause. Daniel felt like he was floating outside his own body, watching this happen to someone else. After the announcement, people swarmed them with questions and congratulations. But Daniel kept thinking about what Victoria had said, about how his one small act had created this ripple effect. He'd helped one person, and now that person was going to help thousands. Later that night, after the gala ended, Daniel stood outside the hotel, taking in the cool air. The city lights sparkled around him, and he thought about how different everything was from that January night. How far he'd come, how much had changed. But he also thought about all the people out there right now struggling like he used to, working night shifts at dead-end jobs, sending out proposals that never got responses, wondering if they should give up on their dreams. People sitting alone in tiny apartments, counting their last few dollars and hoping for a break that might never come. Now he had the power to be someone's break, to be the person who said yes when everyone else said no, to give someone else the chance that Victoria had given him. A homeless man approached from the shadows, shivering in the cold. He looked young, maybe mid-20s, and his clothes were thin and worn. Excuse me, sir. I hate to bother you, but do you have any spare change? I'm just trying to get enough for some food. Daniel looked at the young man and saw himself from not so long ago. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. Instead of just spare change, he handed the man $200 bills. The man's eyes went wide with shock. That's too much, sir. I just needed a few dollars. Keep it, Daniel said. And here's my card. Call me on Monday. I might have a job opportunity for you if you're interested. The young man looked at the business card, then back at Daniel, like he couldn't believe this was happening. Are you serious? Completely serious. Everyone deserves a chance. Daniel smiled, thinking about Victoria and that night on the bench. You never know where one act of kindness might lead. As Daniel walked away toward his car, he felt something he'd never experienced before. Not just happiness or success, but purpose. Real, meaningful purpose. He'd started with nothing and been given everything. Now it was his turn to give back. to be the person who stopped when others walked past, who helped when it would be easier not to. The cycle of kindness continued, growing wider with each passing day. And it had all started with a simple decision on a cold night to help someone in need. Daniel had learned the most important lesson of his life, that the greatest success isn't what you achieve for yourself, but what you make possible for others. He drove home that night knowing that his real work was just beginning. The foundation would help hundreds, maybe thousands of people. Each person they helped would go on to help others. The ripple effect would spread far beyond anything he could imagine. And somewhere out there on some cold night in the future, someone else would stop to help a stranger. They'd give up something they needed for someone they didn't know. And that moment would change everything for both of them, just like it had for Daniel and Victoria. Because that's how the world changes. Not through grand gestures or huge donations alone, but through small acts of human kindness that multiply and spread until they transform everything they touch. One person, one moment, one choice to care when caring is hard. That was the real story. That was what mattered most. And Daniel would spend the rest of his life making sure that story continued.